Okay, Kirk, which archetype are you? There's the jock, the intellectual, the virgin, the fool, and the lady of the evening. Horror movies, which one are you?
That depends. Which one makes it out alive this time around?
As we know, only the virgin can ever possibly survive.
Well, then I'm screwed.
Well, I guess that's really all that matters. Let's talk about Cabin in the Woods.
Pen Made Mightier without wood.
Cabin in the Woods is not your typical horror movie. Came out in 2012, directed by Joss Whedon, God of the Nerds. If you haven't seen Cabin in the Woods, I'd highly recommend you go ahead and stop the video, go and check it out. I don't even care if I don't get your review. Just go and do it. Movie's worth it. And you might say, I don't like horror movies. You know what? That's fine. You're going to like this one because it's just too damn good. It's a unique horror comedy blend that is unlike any kind of horror comedy blend I've seen before, and it only has a 72% on Metacritic. That's bullcrap. I don't care who you are. That is bullcrap. Cabin in the Woods is the unique kind of horror comedy that seeks to completely deconstruct a genre and examine it from all angles, but at the same time it also expands and further extols the virtues of a genre in a way that most movies that even dare attempt such a monumental task fail spectacularly at. And it's worthy of a lot of critical praise for that. As if that's not enough, it even provides a loose framework that lets you examine some of your favorite horror movies and see if they fit the mold. And if they don't, well, there's answers for that too. It's cool. Now, when I was a kid, Scream kind of did this as well with the whole horror movie rules, never say, "I'll be right back," and never have sex and all of that stuff. And it was true. It worked pretty well. Scream has not aged very well and is now kind of campy in my eyes. Cabin in the Woods isn't campy yet, and I kind of doubt it ever will be, but I could be wrong. As if I haven't sung its praises enough, Cabin in the Woods also manages to make fun of horror movie classics as well as foreign horror movie tropes all seamlessly, and it does so with brilliant elegance. So if you don't know the story of Cabin in the Woods, 5 teenagers get into an RV and head out for a quiet weekend of camping at a cabin in the woods. Sound like every movie you've ever seen? Of course it does, because that's the foundation of most good horror movies. I would say one of the quintessential horror movies of my generation, Evil Dead, is probably one of the absolute main inspirations for this entire subgenre. Along the way, they are greeted by a creepy dude who tells them not to go, but they go anyway. All the while, the movie starts to work underneath itself with a subterranean scientist layer who are observing these kids as a part of some sort of dark and sinister ritual. Already, movies get meta real fast. So the kids get to the cabin in the woods, and of course they do all of the tropey stuff you expect from the beginning of these kinds of movies, and eventually they end up going down into the basement. The basement full of creepy objects that all seem linked to a bunch of different monsters. And there we see all the scientists betting as to what monster they will summon. For whatever object they interact with will determine what this horror movie is about. They end up summoning a pretty standard, some redneck zombie types who seek to try and dismember and destroy them. And, it's good they went with something simple, because it sets the framework quite well. Of course, the big twist comes when they start to realize that they are trapped in a horror movie type setting and seek to leave it. Soon you realize there's some sci-fi overtones, and in the end, they rebel not just against the movie that they're in, but the people who put them in this experiment or ritual, whatever you want to call it, in the first place, and unleash all of the horrors and nightmares in their underground box maze onto them in a delicious bit of true horror as we see monsters unleashed Scooby-Doo style onto the world. So, why are they doing all this? Well, in this mythos, every year, one country has to succeed in making one true horror movie. They don't really call them movies, but they have to complete the ritual. And every country does so differently. Usually only America and Japan succeed, because only America and Japan make decent horror movies for the most part. Again, you always get some interesting outliers. It pokes fun at the sappy Japanese endings that sometimes happen in Japanese horror movies, where love conquers all and saves them from their misfortune. Happens sometimes in American horror movies too, but not nearly as often as it does with Japanese horror movies. I never really understood it, and it's never really satisfying to me. Could just be a cultural thing. It's also the only horror movie I can think of where the protagonists actively choose to lose, sacrificing their lives and the lives of everyone they know instead of living under a false pretense. Blessedly. It's also the first horror movie I can think of in a long time that isn't shooting for a franchise. We all love a good horror franchise from time to time. I myself am a big fan of Paranormal Activity, even if some of the later ones have been a little bit weird. And I was a real big fan of Wreck for 2 movies. But this movie isn't shooting for a franchise, not even like prequels or side stories or anything like that, despite the fact that it has a nearly infinite universe to do it with now, and I would actually kind of love it. But no, the one movie was enough. There's not even further works slated or on the books. The archetypes and tropes of horror movies are very thoroughly explored in this film. The 5 teenagers being the jock, the nerd, the virgin, the whore, and the fool being necessary for America's ritual to be complete. They have to do a series of tasks in which they're killed off in a specific order. In the end, the virgin can live or die, but what's important is that all the other ones bite the bullet. And that rounds out so many franchises. Of course, the movies that buck the tropes, you might be saying, this movie doesn't fit that mold, this movie doesn't fit that mold. Well, that means that year we didn't complete the ritual. It means maybe Japan did. Or Australia, Canada. Yet, we get some new tropeless characters in this too. The scientists don't really fit any mold that I can think of. Even how they interact with the monsters is a very non-traditional way of engaging the horror that lurks beneath. Almost felt like SCP in a weird way, and I love SCP, so I loved this. They even managed to do what I'd consider to be mostly impossible, which is to merge modern-day science with magic and have it feel plausible. There's a whole automatic blood dispensing machine that enacts some ancient runes, and they do it all automatically from their computer hub while praying to their dark idols. It's creepy to see. It's an insane, ludicrous, out-of-the-box plot that only a true genius really could have thought about, and somehow it all feels believable. And that's part of that Whedon magic. You gotta give it to him. Even if you don't like him, he can make the impossible seem probable. In the end, I think I'd really like a prequel to Cabin in the Woods, or maybe some side series comics, or just to see how rituals in other countries worked. I think it would be brilliant. I'd eat it up with a spoon, even if it wasn't the best, because this is such an engaging and interesting concept. I feel like it could go forever. But I really gotta respect Whedon for saying, no, I think this is enough. In an age where we see horror movies churned out year after year after year and going down the hill fast, it was really nice to see something I didn't expect. So if you loved Cabin in the Woods like I did, go share it with your friends. Show it to somebody who hasn't seen it. If you like this deconstruction, share it around. Thanks for sticking with us on Pen Made Mightier, and have a happy Halloween.
Pen made mightier without royalty.